This is me 5 years ago buying Rolex Explorer from the AD. And this is me now more than 5.5 years later, and I still have this watch in my collection. In today's video, we will do a long-term review of this timepiece, and I'll try to tell you how my feelings towards it have changed, evolved, and all the positives and the negatives of this model. First of all, the case and the dimensions. I have the 39mm diameter version. It's about 48mm from one lug to another, 20mm lug opening, and about 12mm in case height. I am known as someone who does appreciate smaller watches. However, I think on this model specifically, the 36mm is a little bit too small. The 40mm and the 39 were very similar, so there isn't really a big difference between the two. I did try all three models on my wrist, and this 39mm version is still my favorite, but as I said, the 40mm version, in my opinion at least, wears very similar to this watch. Rolex has been making Explorer in one shape or another since 1953. And over the years, of course, they have almost perfected the formula. I think the dimensions that this watch has are almost perfect. And of course, this is a luxury watch, and that comes with some advantages and disadvantages. Say what you will about Rolex sports models, maybe they're overhyped, maybe they're not worth the premium on the resale market, but you can't say that they're not finished to a very high standard. I did a few videos about the finishing of Rolex watches, and this one here is no exception. Even though this is one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, sports models that Rolex offers, the quality of the finishing is still fantastic. You have a high polish finish on the sides of the case as well as on this bezel, and then you have the brushed or satin finish on the rest. One of the elements of this watch's design that shows the most wear is the bezel, because it's finished with this high polish, and any little scuff will of course show like crazy. The other place is the bracelet, because that's the part of the watch that constantly makes contact with the desk, with the airplane seat, with the keyboard, things like that. So of course that part also gets scuffed up quite a bit. And lastly, the clasp, just like on every other watch, shows a lot of wear. Luckily, this clasp is finished with a satin finish, so it's not as bad as some of the other Rolex watches, like for example, the GMT Master features that high polish strip in the middle that gets scuffed up like crazy. The other positive of this Rolex being a luxury watch is of course the build quality, the tolerances, just how solid this watch feels in your hand. Our brain somehow knows when something is of a high quality. Like for example, if you take a chess set that costs $20 and then you take a chess set that costs $500 and you look at it and you feel the pieces and you sort of move the pieces around, how well these chess pieces are balanced, you can right away tell the difference between the two. You don't have to be spelled out that this one is more expensive than this one is better quality than this one. You just know. And when you pick up a high quality watch, your brain instantly knows, yeah, this is sort of a higher end item. But there are some negatives that come with it being a luxury watch also. Mainly the pricing of this watch. Even if you're able to get one at the retail, and paying $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for a watch is a lot of money, especially for a sports watch, especially for a field watch. And this sort of luxury kind of muddies the waters, because this watch initially was supposed to be a utility and not a luxury. It's a field watch. So that is one of the negatives of these watches becoming luxury items. As they rise in price, they lose some of that utility value, some of that spirit of adventure. I try to wear my watch as much as possible. It's not a safe queen by any means, but I do have to admit that there are quite a few activities that I wouldn't bring this watch on with me just because of the price and just because of where I am in life. I'm not in a position to sort of say, whatever, $7,000, $8,000, if I damage the watch, who cares? It's a lot of money to me, so I wouldn't take this watch on some things that possibly I would have taken it if it weren't so expensive. The other sort of negative side about this watch being a luxury item is of course the perception that comes with wearing a Rolex. Some people would look at that as a positive, but there is a bit of a, let's say, stigma with wearing a Rolex watch, and it's really up to you as a wearer to sort of pay attention to that or not. Over the years wearing this watch, I got nothing but compliments, especially from watch guys, and I usually get one of two responses. One is, oh, I have the same watch, or I know someone who has the same watch. Or number two, oh, that's really good choice. Nice Explorer. Usually you see Submariners out in the wild, so it's nice to see someone wearing something different. Those are the two sort of responses that I get to wearing this watch out in public, if I do get this watch noticed, because 99.999% of the time, no one even knows what it is on your wrist. Or if they do recognize it's a Rolex, they just sort of ignore it. It's not a flashy item, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of people do love and choose Explorer. In terms of the dial, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's perfectly balanced. I have the version with the loomed 3, 6, and 9 indexes. However, there's the previous version without that loom. It's done in metallic, which I don't think looks as good. And because the set of hands and the indexes are rhodium plated, they don't tarnish and they stay nice and sharp. The finishing to them is also of a pretty high quality. The attention to detail and how sharp this dial really is in terms of the finishing and in terms of the design. Rolex is famous for not having any AR coating on their crystals. Luckily, this watch offers a black dial with sort of white indexes, so there is a pretty stark contrast between the two. Reading this watch is pretty easy in all lighting conditions, and that's actually another one of my favorite parts about wearing this watch. When I need to quickly glance at my watch, let's say I'm in a meeting or I did it at church where it's probably a little rude to look at your watch, you can sort of tell what time it is at a quick glance because it is so readable from a variety of different angles. One of the things that I started to appreciate about Rolex watches the more I got into watch collecting and the more different luxurious watches I have experienced is the quality of their bracelets. I think Rolex is still the king in this sort of $10,000 under $10,000 price category with their bracelet quality and finishes. And you might disagree with that, that's totally fine, but that's just my personal opinion. I think this bracelet is excellent. Usually I'm a type of person who likes to play around with different straps. Like for example, my Speedy, I have it on the NATO strap sometimes, I have it on this Velcro strap sometimes, I switch the bracelets around, I put it on the leather strap. This watch here just stays on the bracelet. That's how good this bracelet is. It's nice and solid, it feels good on the wrist, the clasp is great, as I mentioned, it features this sort of satin finish so it doesn't scratch as easily, and this one does feature a half link, so you do have a bit of extension for those hot days when your wrist expands. And yes, it does have this sort of first protruding link, but the way it's designed and the way it's integrated into the bracelet, once again with the experience of making these watches for decades, Rolex has sort of perfected that element, so it doesn't really protrude all that much and it wears really well on the wrist. And here's what it looks like on my 7.5 inches wrist. This watch wears larger than you would expect. I think the dial takes quite a bit of real estate of this design, so that's why it appears larger on the wrist. Also, the lug-to-lug distance of about 48 millimeters is not that small, it's probably somewhere in the middle. So I am really happy with the fit of this watch. It's also quite thin, about 12 millimeters in case height, and that's what makes this watch one of the better go anywhere, do anything type watches. Even if you're wearing a suit, you can easily wear this watch, and I have worn this watch with a suit many times. It just slips under the cuff of your shirt and it's very understated. The other thing on the wrist that I don't often talk about is the weight. I think this watch is perfectly balanced in terms of its weight. It partially has to do with the case design. Again, over many years, Rolex has perfected the case design. It also has to do with the perfectly balanced and weighed bracelet. So the bracelet and the case together, they form this sort of perfect harmony where when you put the watch on your wrist, it just feels great. Since this is one of the older Rolexes at this point, kind of weird to say, it features one of the older movements, the caliber 3132, which is an excellent movement. It's a high beat movement that beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour. It has 31 joules and about 48 hours of power reserve. Yes, the power reserve by modern standards is on the lower side, but everything else about this movement is excellent. In 5 years, it hasn't really gained or lost much time. And again, I wear this watch for many different activities. It dealt with shock, probably dealt with some magnetism, working on a laptop, having it around my iPhone with the MagSafe or whatever that technology is called. So it deals with quite a few different magnets here and there. And overall, it's been a pretty resilient and accurate movement. So to sum it all up, I am still enjoying this watch immensely. It's been more than 5 years. It's actually been 5.5 years of ownership, and I don't see this watch leaving my collection anytime soon. I think that's one of the good markings of a good watch, whether you would want to trade it for something else. Sometimes when you get a watch, you right away notice that is the wrong choice and you should have gotten this or that, and then you start looking for a way to flip the watch so you can upgrade or downgrade or side trade for something else. Not the case here. I am enjoying my time with this watch, and this watch has actually saved me from purchasing a bunch of other watches, because whenever I see another watch that I really like and it's kind of similar or it's in a similar category as the Explorer, I start thinking to myself, would I rather wear that or would I rather wear the Explorer? And pretty much until now, the Explorer has always won. And last thing I want to talk about is the pricing of this watch. It pretty much held its value, and even though I myself I'm not planning to sell this watch anytime soon, it is still kind of nice to know that it holds its value. If you bought a car and 5 years later the car was worth the same amount of money, where all the other cars and other car brands have lost 50% of their value, you'd probably feel really good. Even though you're not planning to sell the car, it just makes you feel like, hell yeah, I made the right decision. And that's how I kind of feel with this watch. Now, whether the watch holds its value in the future or drops in value or gains in value, again, I'm not really planning to sell it. I didn't sell it when it was pretty much double the value as it is right now. So hopefully I don't have to sell it in the future. But it's just something to mention that these watches do hold their value pretty well, or have held their value pretty well over the last 5.5 years. It does make you feel kind of nice. I appreciate you watching this video all the way until the end. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for more videos like this in the future. And leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about the Rolex Explorer. Do you have one in your collection? Have you got rid of one from your collection? Especially if you did that, I do want to hear from you why you sold it. Or are you planning to buy a Rolex Explorer? Let's get this conversation going. I always enjoy reading your comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.